Hello, I'm Carolyn. I'm a regional product specialist in Dublin, and I lead the brand insights and measurement products in the European, Middle East, and Africa region. Today, I will walk you guys through BrandLift for TrueView campaigns on YouTube and how to use this type of measurement to drive brand perception of your clients. For those of you who have not heard of BrandLift, BrandLift is a tool to measure the impact of TrueView campaigns on your brand. Part of it can also be used for digital campaigns. I will highlight which ones. If you have any questions, I am joined by my colleague Stefan on the event page. He will answer any questions that you might have, and if we have time at the end, we might answer some live. So, let's begin. Let's have a look at what we're talking about today. First of all, I will guide you through why you should be using BrandLift and how it works, including the methodology behind it. And then we will look at how the results actually look like and how you can utilize the good as well as the bad results for optimization purposes. So let's look at why you should be using BrandLift. We as individuals are spending more time touching digital experiences than we have in the past. Digital is integrating deeply into our lives with more time spent online, on more screens, in more places. On average, approximately 100 hours of content is uploaded to YouTube every minute, representing a large repository of available videos for a user to watch. 6 billion online videos are actually being watched every month. This obviously represents a large opportunity for businesses to get in front of users. However, at the same time, brands can get lost amongst a large repository of information. So, how does a brand make sure that advertising is driving impact? Measurement of brand impact in the digital world is still a challenge, despite any kind of development in technology. While marketers understand digital is key and believe that digital is fundamental for their brand positioning, 50% of brand marketers still think that digital metrics are not working for them. So why do we think this is? What we have heard from marketers in a recent survey that we ran were 3 challenges that they face today. First of all, brand campaigns are still measured by proxy metrics, meaning a lot of them are measured over clicks and conversions. Even though you might get a lot of conversions out of a brand campaign, it doesn't tell you anything about the actual brand perception that your advertising has achieved. Secondly, industry standard research methodologies leave room for improvement. And last but not least, results are slow and after the fact, making it difficult to learn and improve effectiveness quickly, because you often have to wait until the end of a long flight to actually get results. So after the money has been spent, you get the results of what actually has not been working. So let's imagine a perfect world. What if we could understand the impact of brand advertising and make adjustment mid-flight and not wait until the end of the campaign to see, for example, what initial targeting was not working? What if we could test different creatives before putting the big dollars onto one of them? Or what if we could even analyze the impact of sequential storytelling? So is it, for example, worth exposing people to a series of ads, or would one big ad blast be enough to get the brand perception that you're looking for? So we looked at all the hurdles that brand marketers are fearing in the brand measurement in the digital world, and in addition took those 3 scenarios into consideration. And what we have introduced is BrandLift. BrandLift is a fast, real-time, free, and actionable solution that will help solve brand measurement and drive innovation. We measure the metrics that matter, such as brand awareness or consideration, through a best-in-class methodology and provide initial results in just 1 to 2 weeks into your flight, allowing you to make adjustments to your campaign. So you don't have to actually wait until the end of the flight before making adjustments to the right now running flight. So what are the metrics that we can actually measure? Here you can see different alternatives along the consumer funnel. So before starting to measure certain metrics, an advertiser has to decide which step in the consumer journey he's trying to influence. So for example, if the struggle lies with users not even knowing about a brand, the impact advertising has on ad recall and brand awareness could be interesting. So do people remember seeing an ad of my brand, and are they aware of my brand? Vice versa, if the advertising campaign might have a more actionable KPI and is, for example, looking to impact sales to a certain extent, the impact on consumer decision close to purchase are more interesting. Here we can measure metrics such as favorability, so do people favor my brand over others, or purchase intent. Are they currently intending to purchase something? On all of those metrics, we can measure them on your brand impact, but also if you're interested if the product of a certain brand is driving impact, we can also measure that. I'll explain now how this actually works. So let's first look at everything outside of brand interest. So let's look at ad recall, brand awareness, consideration, purchase intent, and favorability. Those can be measured for any type of TrueView campaign. So those can be measured for TrueView campaigns. So how does it work? First of all, when you set up your campaign, we look at the overall potential audience that you could be targeting with your targeting settings. Then we split this targeting group into two groups. The first part of the group will see your ad, so it's considered the exposed group. The other part of the group will not see your ad, thus is representing our control group. After that, both the exposed, after having seen the ad, and the control group will at some point see a YouTube survey, which will appear in front of videos. So instead of seeing a normal ad that will usually be shown in front of videos, they will now see a survey. The user will be then asked the respective question depending on the metric the advertiser is measuring. So for example, for ad recall, he will be asked, have you recently seen an ad of any of those brands? Or for consideration, he will be asked, do you consider any of those brands? The questions are predefined. The answers, especially which competitors an advertiser wants to be compared against, can be customized. A user will only see a maximum of one survey per day on YouTube. Also, from the answers, he can choose as many as he wants, so it's a multiple answer question. If he does not want to give an answer, he can either choose the answer none of the above, or wait 15 seconds until the survey disappears and he can continue on to his normal video. After about 7 days, the results will be published, and what we do, we run a statistical model and we compare the results of the exposed group versus the control group, and we see if there was a statistically relevant uplift. If there was a statistically relevant uplift, we will show you the uplift. Otherwise, we will tell you that there was no lift. Now, let's look at brand interest. Brand interest can be measured for both TrueView and display campaigns. The first part of how it works is the same. We will split your audience into two groups. One half will see the ad, so the exposed group. The other half will not see the ad. So this is again the control group. But instead of now showing that audience a survey afterwards, we will measure their impact on search behavior afterwards. So we look at their behavior on google.com as well as YouTube and look at if there's an increase in the search queries. The search queries can be customized by you, so if you set it up or if your advertiser can determine which keywords he wants to measure, and we will give access to an uplift in the organic search traffic. For example, afterwards you can see if your exposed groups was more likely to search for your brand, for example, or to search for your products that you were showcasing in the ad. So this is how the two different things are working. Let's summarize. So first of all, out of the potential targeted audience, two randomized groups are created. An exposed group that will see the ad and a control group that will not see the ad. We will serve the survey or analyze the organic search on Google and YouTube for both groups. This is all done without having the hassle of implementing tags. And then, last but not least, we deliver results in as little as 7 days for some metrics, giving you insights into the impact of advertising. So for anything outside of brand interest, this generally takes as little as 7 days. For brand interest itself, as we have to analyze the internal organic search results, this can take 14 to 28 days. Usually after 28 days, you should see results, so as long as there has been enough behavior of both the control and exposed group on those keywords that he shows. Let's look at a few things to keep in mind before setting up. First of all, BrandLift can be measured for up to 3 metrics on every TrueView campaign. That means, first of all, you can measure the brand interest, so the search lift. So for example, was my brand able to increase organic search traffic? Next thing, you can measure ad recall. So do people remember seeing an ad of my brand or my product? Even though this sometimes might be considered an upper funnel metric, we recommend to measure this metric on no matter what goal it is you have, because it tells you how memorable your creative was to the exposed audience. So was your brand visible enough in the creative to really create an impact on the audience you were targeting? And additionally, you can always have a third metric that you measure. So this can be either brand awareness, consideration, favorability, or purchase intent. So awareness, the question would be, are people aware of my brand? Consideration, do people consider my brand? Favorability, do people favor my brand over others? And purchase intent, do people intend to purchase my brand? Another very important thing to remember, you might not have seen BrandLifts in your account. This is for a reason. BrandLifts right now have to be set up internally. That means you have to please contact your representative to set it up. Additionally, it has also been set up before your first impression. So you have to contact us before you start your TrueView campaign. Then we will set it up for you, and then you can start your campaign. This is due to the reason that we have the expose and the control group. If you start your TrueView campaign before we start a BrandLift, you're already exposing to the control group we could hold back to not showing the ad. And last but not least, because this is all done on statistical modeling, in order to get enough responses from the audience, we need enough impressions that we show your ad to and that we won't show your ad to. So there are minimum budget requirements per day required for the BrandLift. Those are depending on the different metrics. There are different requirements, but it is your spend on your TrueView campaign, and then the BrandLift itself is free on top. But your TrueView campaign needs to spend a minimum per day for us to make those analyses. So this was all in regards to why should you be using BrandLift and how does it work, including the methodology. Let's now look into how does the reporting look like and what insights can you take out of the reports. So what you can see here is the reporting overview. So this is the top level reporting that your Google representative can see. Please keep in mind that the reporting as well is internal only. However, your Google representative, once the reports are finished, can send you reports, and you can see all this information as well. On the left-hand side, in light blue, you see the control group, and in dark blue, the exposed group. This is the absolute values of how many percentage of the audience responded to your brand, and how the control to the exposed group compares to. On the right-hand side in purple, you see the relative lift. So this is the difference between the exposed and control group. Highlighted in gray in the background, you see the benchmarks. So this means how are you comparing against the benchmarks of people that are in your country in the same vertical? How common is an uplift? Because you want to know, I mean, sometimes in some verticals, an uplift is potentially common to be 35%. So if you have 20%, it might be low. So you want to know what is the benchmark in your country and your vertical. If we don't have enough data in your country and your vertical, we try to show you the benchmarks of your vertical. But generally, in the light gray text underneath, you will see what the benchmark is referring to. If it is to the country and vertical, and especially which vertical, or if it's simply to the vertical itself. The next thing you can see is the little or the small line across the blue and the purple charts. This is the confidence interval. So remember, BrandLift as a research tool calculates estimates based on samples of users by statistical testing. We need to ensure that both control and exposed group are identical. So we correct small differences with a logistic regression model. This means the value of uplift is the most probable value that you can see here. Confidence intervals, so the line, show you the range of possible values. And last but not least, we will also show you when there's no lift. That means if the difference between the control and exposed group was too small, not statistically relevant, or even negative, we will show you that there's no lift. But don't forget, this doesn't mean anything negative. It simply means we haven't measured an uplift. There is still insights you can take out of this. But we'll talk about this in a few minutes. So what we just saw was the overview of reporting. However, there's also detailed cuts that can lead to a little bit more insights. So for example, you will see detailed uplift for every age and gender category. So you can dive into the demographics and see what demographic is your creative speaking to the most, and which demographics have you potentially not been able to reach. So for example, sometimes you realize that it seemed like a generic creative that you were using. However, it actually spoke more to males than it did to females. So potentially there's something you need to change if you want to target females, or maybe your product is more reasonable to go for males, so you focus on that audience. Next thing, you also want to know how often you need to reach people in order to be really effective. So we show you if the difference between if you reach somebody just once or if you reach them twice. So for example, was the uplift in a brand metric higher if you reach them twice, or was one already enough? This often gives you insights into how representative was your brand really in the creative. If it is a really strongly creative or strong brand recognition, then often once is enough to create a significant uplift. Sometimes you can realize though that is not strong enough, and only 2 impressions really lead to an uplift. Next thing, you also see the difference between viewers versus skippers. So obviously for viewers, because you pay for them, you want to know how much uplift are you generating for them. But we also show you how much if there is an uplift for skippers. So the people you didn't pay for, did you actually generate a brand uplift? Because this would be something that would be good for you and also for free, because in that sense you're not paying for those people, yet generating an uplift because the initial part of your ad was strong enough. The other 3 categories we have are creative, targeting, and geo. For creative, this is mainly for measuring the impact that different creators can have. If you haven't really decided yet which is the strong one you want to go with for your big campaign, you can here measure the individual ones and which one had the most impact, but also dive into different targeting and geo segments. So which one is the audience segment that your ad is really speaking to? So this is the part for the reporting. Obviously, the question is now, how likely is it that I am to generate a lift? So as I mentioned earlier, not every campaign generates lift, and we tell you when there's no lift. What we do with past brand lifts, or on a regular basis, we identify for each category how likely a lift occurs for a certain metric. So this table shows you the outcome of our Q4 analysis. If you were, for example, to measure consideration, 41% of campaigns in Q4 have seen an uplift. Not every campaign is great enough to generate those lifts and really impact your audience. So you don't just need a good campaign, you need a great campaign to uplift the toughest metrics. So that means, for example, obviously, if you want to measure lower funnel metrics, those are harder to move because people are less likely to move down that funnel. So it is harder from the BrandLift perspective to really move those metrics. That's why, for example, if you want to move the purchase intent of people, you need to have a really great creative. And as you can see, only 36% of the campaigns that ran in Q4 with BrandLift were able to really move the purchase intent. So keep this in mind that the creative especially is really important here. So then let's look back at how do you really deep dive into those results and analyze them. So we talked about 3 different scenarios in the beginning. First of all, we talked about making adjustments mid-flight, testing different creatives before putting the big dollar onto one of them, or even analyzing the impact that sequential storytelling could potentially have. So how do we deep dive into our results and analyze each of those 3 scenarios? Let's start with testing different creatives. This one is rather simple. What you can do is you can run one TrueView campaign for various creative and see which one is your golden egg in this case. So which creative generated at the end of the day a higher uplift in the audience segments that you were looking to generate uplift in. Next thing is sequential storytelling. So for this one, you want to combine your brand lift with YouTube remarketing, meaning the second exposure, so the second ad you want to expose people to, is only targeted at people having seen the first impact, and you measure again the impact with brand lift, and so on and so forth. So you can do this over 2, 3, 4 ads to kind of see if the more ads you show to someone, if the impact is still there, or if at some point after 3 or 4 exposures, the uplift in your metric is not going any further. At some point, you will realize that there's often an optimal point reached in frequency in which you, for example, reach the optimal level of brand awareness that you can get. And potentially, you need to also look deeper into the funnel, because once a big awareness is being created, potentially you want to know if the consideration has actually been moved, not just them knowing about it, but them also starting to consider it. So then coming to the last one, how can we make adjustments mid-flight? We have to look at this one in 2 steps. The first step is obviously identifying the golden egg. So identifying the audience segments that your creative already worked for really well and making sure that you spend on those, because those are the ones that responding well to you. So you want to really make sure that you're spending with them and exposing yourself to them. Then we also have those pockets in which you potentially have a no-lift results. No-lift does not necessarily mean anything negative. It simply means we did not measure a significant impact. It does not mean that there was no impact though. Often what you have to do in this case is you have to deep dive into what could have been potential reasons of why no impact was measured. This can have there are 4 different scenarios that could have occurred. Let's look at them step by step. So the first scenario is that there was potentially something wrong with the setup. Does not mean the Google representative did something wrong, but often setting KPIs versus measuring them in the right way sometimes goes 2 ways. So for example, the first thing that can happen is when you measure brand interest, you have to choose the keywords that on search you want to measure. Oftentimes we see advertisers choosing very generic keywords that are not necessarily directly related to the brand or the ad they were showing. So what happens in those cases is that if the keywords are not generic and not directly related, we don't see a direct uplift because people were not motivated to search specifically those keywords on search. So you won't see an uplift, but this is caused because those 2 things are not correlated. The next thing that can happen is setting up brand versus specific product questions. So for example, I was talking earlier that you can measure either the impact on a brand or the impact on the product of a brand. And depending on that, sometimes our questions are differently. So for example, for awareness, it will be, are you aware of my brand? Or are you aware of this specific product? So let's assume you have a very lower funnel focused creative that is supposed to drive action and sales for a certain product, and you're highlighting the sale of this product. If you end up asking, have people seen my brand? They might not recall your brand because they only remember seeing the product. So you want to make sure if the creative is product focused, ask the product focused question. If you have a rather generic creative that is more brand focused, ask the brand question. The next thing that can go wrong is that the creative is potentially not strong enough. This can have also, again, different reasons. For example, potentially the creative is not optimized for digital, meaning it is not short and snappy, the brand is not visible enough, especially important, you want to have the brand visible in the beginning, also if you want to have a free impact on the skippers. And then also if you measure rather lower funnel metrics such as consideration, purchase intent, favorability, in this case it's important to have a really good call to action in the creative. Like, what do you want the people to do? Next thing that can go wrong is media noise. Generally, we advise everybody running brand lifts to run the brand lift either in line with other advertising or shortly before the other advertising. So that means, let's take the TV example. If you're planning to run a TV campaign, try to run your TrueView 7 days before TV, or even more if you don't know which creative you want to choose for TV and you want to analyze the impact of different creatives they can have, or you can start them at the same time. However, the issue is, let's say if TV started 2 months ago, that obviously your control group will have been exposed to the creative on TV. So this means they're contaminated and potentially already aware of your ad. So the questions you want to ask in this case, like you can still run BrandLift, it's just that you would have to ask a slightly different question. So in that case, it means that you maybe want to ask, does TrueView have an additional impact on top? So the movement or lift you will see might not be as big, but you will see the additional impact that TrueView has. But still keeping in mind that your control group has been exposed to your brand before. Another thing that you can also do is potentially measure, for example, TV is always very awareness type focus. So you could also measure consideration. So has TrueView managed to move the users further down, and then make the TrueView creative not the same as TV, but a little bit more call to action focused. And then last but not least, there's the targeting. So in the targeting, what can go wrong is that the targeting is not aligned with the KPI that you're measuring. So for example, if you're measuring an upper funnel metric, you also want to use upper funnel type of targeting that we have available on YouTube. If you're measuring lower funnel metrics, you want to make sure your targeting is aligned to rather actionable targeting settings we have. So those are the potential reasons of what can go wrong. Make sure when you run a brand lift and you end up having the no lift in a certain categories, to go through all of those 4 segments and analyze what could have gone wrong. For the creative section, it's also important to utilize YouTube Analytics in combination, because if you notice that your creative maybe wasn't as responsive enough, YouTube Analytics can tell you even more about where exactly or what exactly was wrong in your creative. For example, was there a certain point in time besides the skippable button coming up when everybody kind of tuned off? This will show you if there was something that maybe people didn't like seeing, or maybe it was too long and the attention kind of dragged off after a while. Just keep in mind to combine also BrandLift with other measurement methods such as YouTube Analytics. Perfect. Then last but not least, let's look at a scenario. So what we see here is in blue, we see a campaign that has been using BrandLift. In green, we see a campaign that has not been using BrandLift, so it hasn't been optimized over the run of 3 different flights. And then what we did is we ran, for both campaigns, we ran 3 different flights and measured the BrandLift per dollar spent. And then for the blue one, in between, we always ran a BrandLift and optimized our campaigns based on the results of BrandLift. So how do we start? First of all, we obviously picked an initiative and planned our campaign. So what is it really that we want to achieve? Based on what we want to achieve, we set our measurement goals up and also shows the competitors that we want to measure against and the keywords we potentially want to measure on search. Our main KPI that we were looking at was brand awareness. So let's go. So we started both campaigns. The first thing we noticed in our Google campaign was that from the pockets of where we saw the most lift was of people that previously viewed our ads, so the remarketing targeting, and makeup fans. So we excluded everything else from our campaign and continued running only with the makeup fans in our remarketing list. Then we started another flight with those people. So then we noticed that, okay, our creative did not really seem to work because we needed 2 impressions instead of just 1 to really make an impact, because the 1 impression now showed us no lift, 2 impressions, however, showed us lift. So the question we asked ourselves was, potentially our creative is not strong enough. So in that case, what we did was, first of all, we made sure our brand is visible early in the creative and also throughout the creative in the corners. And then also we try to feature some celebrities, maximizing the lift and brand awareness. So this obviously shifted our brand lift per dollar spent again. So started the third flight now. Now we actually saw that, okay, one impression is enough to really move people because our brand is really visible. It doesn't need 2 ads to really move them in brand awareness. So what we did is we lowered frequency, and by lowering frequency, we were able to reach more people with the same money. And at the end, after those 3 flights and 3 adjustments we made over time, we had the optimal combination for an always-on present. So instead of just going with the initial scenario, what we thought was right, we actually optimized based on real-time feedback to have the optimal spend for an always-on campaign that is going on throughout the year. So this is just to showcase you a scenario of how you could potentially utilizing it and optimizing over time to really make sure you get the most out of what you're spending. So this was all from my side. Let's just gonna look if there were any questions on the group that we might answer. Nope, no questions. So feel free to post any questions you might have on the events page afterwards, and Stefan and myself will answer as much as we can. And then don't forget, BrandLift has to be set up internally by us and before the first impression of your BrandLift campaign. So please contact the Google representative and let us know, and this to have the measurement out of it. Because if you're running a TrueView campaign, have the measurement there. So thank you all for your attention and hope to hear soon from you. Bye!